He read the same report twice. The numbers did not change. A wave, taller than the wall. He circled it in ink, then he passed it up the chain. Somewhere above him a hand set it aside. The sea had been patient for centuries. It was done waiting. He just didn't know when. Go back to the coast of northern Japan. The land is quiet. The sea is close. Here, they built something enormous. A power station facing the Pacific. Concrete and steel engineered to last generations. The men who built it were proud. They had reason to be. This plant would light entire cities. It would run for a long lifetime without trouble. They studied the water. They measured the tides. They built a wall to hold the ocean back. The wall was tall enough. That was the calculation. The engineers trusted the calculation. Everyone did. The sea in front of them looked calm. It had looked calm their entire lives. No living person remembered it otherwise, and so the wall became a promise. The ocean would rise only this high and no higher. They wrote it into the design, they wrote it into their confidence. The plant hummed to life, power flowed, the lights came on. For years nothing went wrong, the sea stayed low, the wall stood dry. Everyone forgot it was ever a question. But the ocean keeps its own records, it does not forget, and buried in old stone and older mud there was another number, a number nobody at the plant had bothered to read. His name was Yukinobu Okamura. He studied the past for a living, not history from books, history from the ground itself. He read earthquakes in layers of soil. He read floods in bands of sand. And in the mud along this coast, he found something, a layer that did not belong. Sand, pushed far inland, farther than any modern wave could reach. Something enormous had come ashore here, long ago before the plant, before the wall. A wave of a scale no one had planned for. Okamura kept digging, the evidence kept growing. This had happened before. It would happen again. He did the math. The wall was not tall enough, not even close, so he spoke up. He sat across from the men who ran the plant. He laid out the layers of sand. He told them what the ground remembered. He warned them plainly. The defenses were built for the wrong ocean. The room listened. Then the room moved on. They wanted certainty. He offered only history. History, they decided, was not proof. His warning did not fit their schedule. It did not fit their budget. It did not fit the story they had already written. So they filed it away. They asked for more study. More study meant more delay. More delay meant nothing had to change, and nothing did. Okamura watched his warning disappear into a process, a committee, a footnote, a problem for another year. They buried this file for years. Subscribe, because there are more. He was not the only one uneasy. Others had done their own calculations. Their numbers pointed the same direction. Up, the wall was too short. The models were too kind. The assumptions were old, but changing the wall would cost a fortune. It would admit the original promise was wrong. It would mean the sea could not be trusted after all. That was unthinkable. So the reports piled up, unread. The warnings aged in drawers, and out past the concrete, the Pacific went on rising and falling, calm, patient, waiting for the day the calculation would finally be tested. It began with the ground, a shudder, then a roar. The earth moved like water, the plant shook, the reactors sensed it and shut themselves down. For a moment the safety systems worked, backup power kicked in, the engineers exhaled. The worst, they thought, was over. It was not. Out at sea, the floor of the ocean had lurched. It shoved a mountain of water toward the shore. Silent at first, then not. The alarm came. A wave was coming. They looked at the wall that was tall enough. The horizon rose, a dark line growing. It did not crest like a normal wave. It simply came on and on. The water reached the wall and kept climbing. It swallowed the top. It poured over the edge like it wasn't there. Seawater flooded the low ground. It found the rooms it was never supposed to reach. It found the generators. The backup power died in the dark. The pumps stopped. The cooling stopped. and deep inside the reactors, the heat began to build, slowly, invisibly. No explosion yet, no sound, just water going still, and metal starting to warm. The lights on the control panels flickered, then, one by one, they went out. The room went black, and no one could see what was happening inside the cores. The answer had been sitting in a report nobody wanted to read. Here is what actually failed. It was not the earthquake. The plant survived the shaking. It was designed for that. What it could not survive was the water, and the water was never a surprise. The wall was built to a specific height. That height came from recent history, a few generations of tide gauges, a handful of storms anyone could remember. But the ocean's real history was far longer. Centuries earlier, a giant wave had struck this exact coast. The evidence was in the sand Okamura found. That ancient wave dwarfed the wall. The designers had measured the wrong span of time. They planned for the sea they knew, not the sea that truly existed. And then came the other flaw. The emergency generators, the last line of defense. They were placed low, near the water. When the wave came over the wall, it drowned them instantly. One flood took out both the power and its backup at once. The reactors were left with no way to cool. From there, physics took over, heat with nowhere to go, fuel melting inside its own shell, hydrogen building then igniting. 3 cores sliding toward collapse. Every piece of it had been foreseen. Every piece had been written down and set aside. The investigation came later. It was long, it was damning, and its conclusion was not really about a wave. Experts combed through the records. They found Okamura's warning. They found the studies that agreed with him. They found the meetings where it all went quiet. The tsunami was called a natural disaster. The report disagreed. It said this disaster was made by people, not by the sea, by the choice to ignore it. The evidence had been there for years. The math had been done. The danger had a name and a height. What was missing was the will to act. A taller wall would have held. Moving the generators would have saved them. Both were possible. Both were affordable. Neither was done, because doing them meant admitting the wall was wrong. And admitting that was more frightening than the sea. So the real flaw was never in the concrete. It was in the room where the warning died. The ocean only did what it always does. The people were the ones who chose not to listen. Decades earlier in China, another engineer warned that a dam could not hold. They ignored him too. And when it broke, it killed more people than anyone has ever admitted.